Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, I hope that you're doing well and you are ready for some Computer America. Today on the program, in the second part of the show, we have computer and technology news, where we are going to, do our best to try to catch you up on everything that's happening with, with the world. We, and by we, I mean me actually in the background, we're going to be working on an article about TikTok. I know, and all of you are going crazy. It's super exciting, but no, this is about recent developments and the whole thing going on with the social media platform. It's actually a very, very comprehensive and in-depth look at what's happening with TikTok and really the government. It's hard to imagine in recent history where the United States government has kind of said, buy this company or you get kicked out of the country. It's very interesting times that we live in, but I promise it's going to be heavy on the tech, and I'm looking forward to getting all of your reactions. But that's in the second part, along with tons of other news. In the first part of the show, though, we have a guest, and today's guest is a company called ZenFri, and they actually make a game called The Last Taxi, and we are lucky enough to have the co-founders, co-producers, everything about this game and what it means for video games and virtual reality, and just. It's going to be a very fun conversation when it comes to all of this. So everyone, we're going to welcome them on in just a moment. And of course, our co-host is continuing on with us. This is her second day. We're very happy to have her. I forgot to introduce her. Hey, there's learning pains on both our ends. Our
Hi,
co-host,
everybody.
Carissa. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm sorry. I just kind of went off to the races. That's completely my bad, but happy to have you back. And thank you for making it. So everyone, once again, Carissa, you'll be hearing a lot more from her because she is going to be our regular co-host, and we're very excited for that. So, Carissa, thank you for, of course, being here today. So let's go ahead and just say real quick, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including links for past shows, future shows, all the shows, and everything that we do here at Computer America. We'll have a link to our guest website, or if you'd like to check it out, there's, of course, lasttaxigame.com. You can check that out directly, or, again, just remember Computer America, and we'll have a link to it. With all that being said, find us on social media, blah, blah, blah. Carissa, if you don't have anything to announce, I think we should just go ahead and get our guest on.
No, let's go for it.
I think so too. So, as I said before, joining us is ZenFri, and we're going to be talking all about their latest game that they have just published, and we're going to get all the details about this. So, joining us is none other than Corey King and D King. They are co-founders, co-producers, co-everything, as they mentioned before the show, and we're very happy to have them on. Corey, D, welcome on to Computer America. How you doing?
Welcome.
Hey, good. How are you guys?
We're doing well. Carissa, I believe she just said she's doing well, and hey, we're very happy to have you. So how these typically go, and Carissa, if you don't mind, just going to ask them real quick to give us a bit of background on Corey, on D, and ZenFri, Last Taxi. I mean, start at the beginning. Have you guys always been making games? When did ZenFri start? And what are your guys' backgrounds? Have you been game producers for long, or is this kind of a first venture?
Well, that's a lot. It's our whole biography. So Zen, anything with numbers or dates, D is definitely better than me. But
we've been on this journey since 2010.
Yeah. But I mean, we started out in film school together actually, and the company was formed so that as opposed to just signing it, the film by this person or the film by that person, there was a way that we could always emphasize the collaborative nature of the company, which is actually why the F in ZenFri is capitalized, because it's our distilled versions of our online handles when we met, reduced down into the title of the company, and it's supposed to represent the sort of like equal partnership of the company. So yeah, we started making.
That's very good that you had handles that could mesh so well together, because ZenFri, great name, because mine was like, XX Dark Slayer, 32. I'm glad that you had something that wasn't childish. Yeah.
Yeah, we dropped the cringe.
Yeah. I mean, there was other elements to our handles. They weren't that simple. We sort of amalgamated them. It works. But and getting into games, part of it came. I don't know, that was still a while ago now, maybe 8 years ago? 7?
10 years ago.
That's also 10 years? Okay.
Yeah, we started in augmented reality.
Yeah, we did an augmented reality game. Essentially, and we didn't know a programmer, and ourselves, we can't code. We had no experience with the game industry, but we had an idea for a game. That game turned out to be Clandestine Anomaly that was predated Pokemon Go, but was a location-based AR game. And at the time, we didn't even know like the term augmented reality. We were just like, we could make a story on the world with this phone thing. And that just led us down this crazy path. And we were just more successful, I suppose, at getting funding for our video game ideas than film on like a larger scale. And we've kind of been doing that since then, but that doesn't mean we won't go back. I mean, we have lots of ideas across mediums. We're developing our next game ideas, of course, as well, but
we've always been gamers personally, though, so it was really easy to switch from being film nerds into gaming nerds.
I mean, essentially, our roles are similar across those mediums. It's like the producers, we come up with the storytelling, we direct the team. They're not exactly analogous, but essentially the company is like the creative output that we put together, and the video game side came through AR, and then we kind of just,
now we're in VR. There's
so much possibilities and potentials in digital mediums like video games. It's hard to escape once you're in it.
Yeah, and something that we have had AR, VR, movies, video games, that kind of thing on the show before. Very interesting, and one aspect that's, I think, that leaves so much to the imagination and so much room for creativity is that no one has it down to a perfect science yet. I don't think anyone has said that, wow, this person, this studio, this group has made the perfect VR game, the perfect AR movie or something like that. There's still a lot of experimentation, which is why I'm going to ask both of you this question. When it comes to augmented reality, virtual reality, you say that you have a film background. With a film, you sit people in front of a screen. They have a box, much like if you're watching the video portion of the show, you have a box and I can curate what's being shown, all that good stuff. That's it. Augmented reality, virtual reality, well, when it comes to AR, it's overlaying, data onto people's surroundings. You don't control where people are watching your content. You don't control, kind of what else they see when it comes to augmented reality. And then virtual reality, you create everything. And it's not just what is in front of a person. It's 360 degrees in all directions. And I have gotten that response from people that virtual reality kind of tires people out because, you can watch a movie in virtual reality and you're always wondering what's happening directly behind me. Is the viewer going to miss something pivotal if they're looking at the top left, but it's actually happening in the bottom right, kind of 180 degrees away from their field of view? My question to both of you again is, how has that discovery, how's that exploration of this technology translated from traditional film? Because there's so many differences between the mediums.
Good question.
Well, I would say our sort of mode of operation in terms of deciding, you get excited about an idea. That's usually the initial spark, but deciding the best format to present it is based on what kind of story you want to tell. So when we told the augmented reality story, the whole idea was that the neighborhood, you being in this, thrown into this thing, thrown out of your normal life, your normal world, being totally transformed by the story, was the core concept of the protagonist as the player. With this game, with the virtual reality, it's sort of like we do a similar thing in terms of we don't have the total backstory of the character in either of those games, because the whole idea is that you are ultimately transported into these different stories. And so with Last Taxi, the whole idea is we actually we give the player the opportunity to decide what to do. It's a choice-based game, and that is partly out of the idea of we don't go into this game and say, you are Sam Shepard, you're going to save the universe, and this is the good way and this is the bad way. It's, you're this lowly person thrown into big events, and you will make decisions, and the game will have outcomes to those decisions, but not judgment. And it's ultimately the fact that the stories in both cases with AR and VR are about the player. In terms of controlling their point of view, I mean, the Taxi is really handy with that. We are sort of able to use a lot of cinematic tricks, since you're in a taxi and we have almost screens. Like each piece of glass in the taxi is like a screen, and we've been very careful to do things like put the passengers in the rear of the taxi, but there's a view screen in front of you so that your eyes are sort of always directed vaguely where they need to be.
Yeah, and of course, Dee, I'll let you respond to that as well if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I wanted to just talk about field of view, that when you're in AR, you're confined to such a small screen. And then VR, since it's around you, you can use environmental storytelling or UI to kind of guide people very slowly and surely. But in AR, we found a lot of difficulty in saying, okay, you got to look this way, because there's so much space around you and the screen is so small that it was a lot harder to guide people compared to VR.
And Carissa, I wanted to get your input in this as well, because I know that most people have. It's just unfortunate that a lot of people haven't had the experience with AR and VR. It's still a technology being adopted by many, many people. And Carissa, I unfortunately don't know your background. Have you, I mean, augmented reality, I'm assuming you played Pokemon Go. What about VR and that kind of thing? Carissa?
I haven't tried the VR stuff yet. I do have a friend that's got one, and she really likes it. Her and her husband use it all the time, and it's super great. But I haven't experienced it myself. I'm kind of waiting until they come out with, a better system before I'm going to drop thousands of bucks on a VR set. But I was listening to what our guest here was saying, Corey, and he was saying, it's, choice-based, which I also thought was really interesting, because that brings me back to a memory of like the Fable series, where everything was all, choice-based, and based on everything that you, went and did, you had different outcomes. So it's kind of like a choose your own story in kind of a way, which I think is really interesting as well.
Yeah, and I definitely wanted to get into Last Taxi, and we already, Corey, you gave us a very good, kind of introduction into kind of the play style, but I wanted to step back just a little bit and say, Last Taxi, for those of us who, know nothing about it, let's say we buy the game, we sit down, we start playing it. What is the kind of overview, the introduction, and then, without spoilers, what can one expect during the gameplay?
Sure. So, I mean, essentially the premise is you actually worked as a programmer in a company that automated things, and you got your own job automated. And in a desperate, like right now, programmers are kind of on top of of the world in terms of availability of jobs.
Security.
And so, us as writers and creatives who, there's a lot of us and there's not always a lot of jobs for us. We wanted to let them know that, that automation's coming for them too at some point.
Well, and sorry to jump on you here, but I mean, there was a story about a number of programmers that have actually outsourced their own jobs, and then when found out, they were replaced. And then yes, there were also instances of people automating their jobs, and not just collateral damage to themselves, but to many other people in the industry. This idea of job loss and job shifting is a very real topic, and I'm surprised you decided to tackle that in a video game.
Well, the video game actually tackles all kinds of issues that are present in our world today, though it seems in the course of making the game, the real world's gotten crazier almost faster than we keep up with. But so you get laid off, and in this last ditch gambit to try to find something to do that is of human value, you basically spend almost all your money buying this this old taxi company where the guy's actually leaving Earth. He's like cashing in his chips, going to an off-world colony, and hopes to start a new life because it's just there's an automated taxi company called Fuber, and they're almost like the rival firm in the game a little bit. But ultimately, what it ends up being, the main premise is you're the last human taxi driver in the future. The hours are long, the pay is terrible, and you have to resist obsolescence. The actual overall thing is it's actually a viewpoint. You being a taxi driver is a viewpoint to be able to pick up passengers who have many different backgrounds and many different stories. So you'll pick up refugees who are illegally entering the city. And you have to decide what to do with them. You'll pick up the head of Fuber, and because they have no understanding of why you exist.
And of course, for anyone out there watching, I decided to pull up, some of the teaser trailer with some of the gameplay. We're not listening to the audio right now because hey, we have the creators here with us. But it's everything from and I'll go ahead and let you kind of describe what we're seeing. But essentially, we're in a taxi and it's the future.
Yeah, you're in a taxi. It's the future. The thing that we sort of honed in on is the idea that conversation, real legitimate, non-algorithm-driven conversation might be the one thing that humans have to relate to other humans. So that's why it's a conversation game. And it has a little bit of, some of this will only be familiar to people who are familiar with VR, but there's a little bit of a job simulator element where there's all these crazy tools around you to deal with the drive. You'll have tractor beams and stuff to hijack cargo from essentially like Amazon drones if you want to make some extra money, things to prevent accident shields. But the core of the game really is picking up these passengers and talking with them. And you eventually end up in the situation, and I won't go into spoilers beyond this, but what ends up happening is after a few days on the job, you get left with a baby in the taxi and you don't know who the parents are. Oh. And that sends you on this huge quest that takes you deep into the mythos of the universe. And you ultimately, at the end of the game, have to take all of your experience of all these different factions, rebels who are also maybe terrorists. There's a lot of perspectives in the game, and you have to make a decision at the end of the game that could lead to one of over 20 endings that vary based on past things you've done in the game, as well as like a critical final decision.
That there's a lot there to break down, and I guess one of them, because you mentioned you cover so many different topics, including class disparity, of course, and here in the questions that we have, social differences, things like that. I mean, these are topics that when someone plays a video game, there are some games out there that you build things with blocks, and that's about the end of it. When you wanted to tackle some of these issues, I guess, and I was about to say not in a fun way, but I mean, something can be entertaining without it being funny, I guess is my point. Were you worried about, I guess, your interpretation or how people would interpret what it is you're trying to say within the game? Because I think being led by the nose can put some people off, but I mean, at the same time, there are real issues and there are real parodies to life.
Absolutely. And we're not trying to give our personal opinions on how things work. There's some people that are good, some people are bad, but ultimately everyone is very neutral. So if a person coming into your taxi who is an illegal refugee, you get to have a digital sandbox where you decide whether you think that's right, whether you think that's wrong. Do you obey them? Do you report them to the authorities? It's open to your decisions and what you think is right and wrong. And we just try to pose questions.
Yeah, my secondary, like, film is my like major in university, but my minor was philosophy, and all we really tried to do was create a framework to pose these debates in the clearest possible way, not trying to encumber it with our own philosophies. Essentially, it's like you get to talk to these capitalists, and some of them have endearing elements. It's not just like all of the rich are terrible because they're rich. They're sort of all trapped within their own problems, and we do really leave it to the player. And you can be very profitable reporting people for illegal activities, but you might find it morally reprehensible, and the game doesn't at the end be like, oh, you always reported people, you're bad. It's like you have lots of wealth, and that wealth does affect the endings. And it was more like trying to like there's weather forecasts. It's more like we're trying to forecast what decisions mean. And our main philosophy, other than that people should be more open to communication and talking to each other to solve our problems, would be projecting the world itself, where we sort of tried to take a lot of the issues, pre-COVID issues, that were affecting the world, like climate change, class stratification, and put it into an environment where those issues are put into an extreme context. It's sort of trying to say it's easier for us to solve our issues today when we have runway than if we just let everything fall off into the abyss and deal with it later. Yeah. That's about the end of our real stamp of this is our opinion. It's sort of like we should discuss these things today, and we want people to consider these things in order to prevent the future that we depict.
And even on a micro level of each character, they have about maybe 4 to 7 endings.
Each passenger.
Each passenger get into. So it's quite a large chunk of wiggle room of how you want to respond at each different point in that one passenger's conversation.
So you might even have a totally different perception based on, like, one player might play the same character and have a totally different takeaway due to just how they responded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I mean, I can think of a number of games, and one of my earliest memories, like, I definitely enjoyed the way it played, but it was like Jade Empire back on the original Xbox. And I can also think of a game that came out kind of recently called Poncho. It was another kind of indie game. And both of those come to my mind because I didn't appreciate those games, how at the end, they've been out for years, whatever. At the end, they were like, make this decision A or B, and then the ending was literally A or B. Like, the gameplay didn't affect the outcome at all. And then, like, in Jade Empire, it was like, kill the god to water the people and prevent famine, or let the god go and you are righteous. And, like, all of your decisions up until that point, after you made that A or B decision, you were good or you were evil. It irked me how binary all of the game, how all the gameplay didn't matter, and how binary the ending was. And it sounds like you decided to not do that.
Yep,
it was a lot of extra work, but we did it.
And we worked pretty hard to make sure that there wasn't an ultimate ending.
And there's no happy ending either. Everyone
no true ending.
No true happy
ending.
No
true ending. No. I mean, some people might be happy with
they'll be pleased, but
maybe.
Happy.
But there's, the ethical or righteous decision from your point of view might not lead to the outcomes you expect. And I mean, it really is like, that's where hopefully the replayability comes in, that people go in and re-explore and find little differences in their decisions and how that affects the game.
Yeah, totally. That's really great. I actually want to just change the subject just a tiny bit here. I know the game kind of takes place in an environmentally kind of, tainted, universe. Why was that important to you guys when you were making the game?
We for us, that's actually like a very huge issue. And today it makes it a little bit different maybe more awkward. Like, before COVID and before all of the craziness, especially in the US, we're from Canada, but it was maybe easier to have that be front of mind. But for us, we do feel that, like, that is the biggest issue that we need to collectively solve, as a society and as a world community. And the fact that it needs to be collectively solved means we got to talk through it and we got to work it out, and we can't just, push one group aside or another group aside to get the optimum outcome. So, I mean, we are both vegetarian. We sort of, don't drive very much. It's sort of, that's with us. And we sort of didn't want to make the game preachy about it. Like when you talk about fun, like you can hijack and be a pirate. You can report whoever you want. Conversations are hilarious, characters, and a lot of the issues. The reason we chose a cartoon art style, which was actually Dee's idea, was if we made it all, you deal with these heady issues and then it's all just grim the whole time. We sort of somewhere between like a Futurama, it's like a zany window into these issues. But you
can laugh at the horror.
Yeah, you can laugh at the horror. But the environmental element for us was just like that's probably an issue that we just want people to explore how it sort of causes an escalation. If whatever side of the migrant debate you're on today, that debate is harder when the environment is destroyed, and wherever you are with income inequality, the issue is worse when people are having their whole islands flooded out by water. It's like all of the issues become contracted when there's more scarcity of resources and scarcity of options as a society.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's really interesting because, it's going to be kids playing this and they're going to be the ones that are going to save the planet. So having this in a video game is kind of like a subconscious way to make them feel those things. Is a really great method to kind of get that word out there and hopefully save the world.
Yeah, we don't, people clearly, not all people, it's a way of trying to have people explore issues without being preached to, because they ultimately have the choice, and explore issues without it seeming like, look, I'm a scientist and I'm telling you to do this.
Right.
Like that's not, it's trying to take a different nexus point.
Absolutely. Sweet.
It's certainly a topic that has come up in a lot of video games, and I gotta say that looking at the screenshots here, this one in particular is kind of the first image you see when people go to your website, and I gotta say, how much is the environment really destroyed? Though you have snow, that's a win, I guess, in the far future that we'll still have snow.
Unless it's a nuclear winter.
That's true. How lost do do the characters kind of have to deal with? Because I feel like if you set the setting in something that's, I guess, too unrelatable, maybe some of these messages, they kind of get blurred. It's like, oh, well, they have to deal with, one of the issues that you have here is enforced fertility control, which I assume is something that, China having the one child rule, things like that, which didn't turn out too good. I mean, again, if you set the setting too far away from the player, maybe they'll be able to hand wave the issue away at the same time. How have some of the other issues that you've kind of put in? How hard was it to not just say, oh, this is China, but still make it fun?
Yeah, well, and the thing is, China was a lot of our debate of how is this possible, or were some areas where some of the team thought maybe that was a bit crazy, and then you'd say, well, go look at the Uyghurs, and then they'd say, oh, what's happening? But I don't know that it's explicitly China. It's like if there's no resources, there's going to be population control.
It's also based on the commentary that a lot of people say, well, maybe people should apply to have children, people that are lower than us. Like there's always that commentary that some people shouldn't deserve to have children, and that's really where I'm coming from, is that if we actually put regulations on that, you have no choice of what end of the line you're going to be on. Are you going to be on the approved or the denied?
Well, and it comes down to the whole child thing is symbolically what the future is all about. If you can't have kids, there is no future, and so and that's why you end up with a kid in your taxi. Like it's all like you sort of are taking the choices and making them metaphorically related to children. But in terms of the cartoonists, I mean, that's a debate that goes back and forth. There's plenty of documentaries that come straight at you and they talk to you with lots of graphs and stuff, and they have a certain effect. But then there's also books like Animal Farm, where everything is metaphorical, and Animal Farm has lasted a long time as a cultural idea. And where that sweet spot is, it's hard. it's hard to say. This area might look like there's some technology going on, but it is the last city, and it's almost technological domination that has allowed this city to thrive, which creates its own set of problems. Humans are essentially modified with chip technology in order to survive in this environment, and that's sort of, partly what we're saying. Do we lose our humanity to survive in this state? There's a lot of different angles, but it is definitely, once you're in the story, you'll see that there's no cows in this world. People are starving.
And we can talk about the winter as well, that we're from Canada, we're in the prairies. It gets to about minus 40 Celsius, which is the same in Fahrenheit. So, winter has this beauty to it, but it's also very harsh conditions to live in. It's really extreme
inhospitable
where we are.
Sometimes.
I'm surprised that you were able to join us today. If it's I know it's summer and it's much warmer, but man, that is frigid. And I'm happy that you two are still alive to put out this game and join us and talk about this. Talk about how big the game is, because I know that especially for games that don't have that I'm assuming you don't have that $100 million AAA budget. No. I'm sure that's maybe the next one, but this one, there's always that balance about the what we'd like to do and what can we reasonably do. How big is the game world, and kind of how much can a person explore? Because I know that the screenshots that we've seen, a lot of the screenshots here that you see are kind of within the taxi or within certain settings. How big is the game world, and what is like the length of play? And of course we can talk about replayability in there as well.
So the traversable area, the area that you could go and actually see and explore at like a reasonable range, is larger than Grand Theft Auto 5.
Wow.
Nice.
So it's huge. And then the height, that big spire that you see, is almost as tall as Mount Everest. So, and now there's a stop at the very peak of that you can only get to with one ending. Mm-hmm. So not everyone will reach that high, but it is very expansive that way. The cast of characters is like about 75 characters, and most characters have a 3-minute branching conversation, and then there's other things you can do during gameplay. So we estimate the playtime is about, for a single playthrough, is about 8 hours, and then there's multiple playthroughs for each character, but also for the overall story. So yeah, I would say that's the.
And for those who love to read in video games, we have novels for you. All the news feed, you can go into the whole feed system and see directly related to what you did that day, if people have gone to jail, if it is the news, what's going on in the world, and there's a whole bunch of information that you can chew through in there.
And some of it's just like really ridiculous stuff. Well, like there's a gala and a Kanye West type figure does something ridiculous. You never meet those characters, but you can see them in the feed interspersed with stories that you had an impact on.
Yeah, and to that point, I play a lot of kind of MMOs and things like that. But Chris, I'm sorry for continuing to bring up Animal Crossing, but what I've heard about that game is that people feel like if you're not in the game, like the world is still moving. The characters are still playing. There's still events going on. It's still an active world as you play it or as you don't play it. And I wanted you, Chris, to kind of speak on how that affected your gameplay, just knowing that it doesn't always revolve around you, and of course seeing the reactions to your actions are important, but a living world is important to you, Carissa, right?
It's been kind of complicated, honestly. This Animal Crossing game is kind of the first one that I've played, because I didn't have like a GameCube when it came out and all that stuff. And the real time has been kind of difficult for me because I'm so used to just picking up a game and just grinding for hours and being like, I got something done. Yeah. But then it's like, there's only so much stuff you can do in a certain day in Animal Crossing because it is only real time. And it's like, okay, then I got to sit around and twiddle my thumbs.
Not your Fallout 4 kind of game.
Right. So I'm honestly guilty of like time traveling, which is kind of a controversial subject. But I like that the world is alive outside of when I am there, because that means a lot of things happen. For example, villagers come in and out of existence, blah, blah, blah. All these things happen. And I think it's really interesting. And might have been bringing into the question at what point
Yeah.
are these considered, like kind of like the AI situation where it's like, oh God, are my villagers alive? Because they've got their own lives outside of when I'm there.
And then
that's kind of how I've seen it.
Yeah, and of course for the last for the last taxi, your actions, and I'm assuming that the more you interact with certain characters, the more events that happen with or without them, and
You gain relationships, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, with
That-
factions
yeah.
specifically more than characters.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say that leads to a lot of branching and a lot of work on your end. That's not the easy way to take it with a game.
It's certainly not like Animal Crossing, though, where there's like multiple players that affect the environment. It is sort of an experience of a limited duration that you'll play again. But we feel like, because the opposite problem of that, and Daniel's super familiar with Animal Crossing, but there's another live world game. Is familiar with Animal Crossing. There is another game that's a shared world growing universe called Destiny, which is made by the people who made Halo.
Yeah.
And you end up with these storytelling issues of like, from the Master Chief era, you are the most important person, save the universe. But then they just transport that into a shared universe where everyone is supposed to be the hero of the universe. And it sort of starts to break down. So for us, at least, well, one, there's just budget and scope of doing that. But the other thing is, like, you can't really say that your protagonist's stories are going to be world-changing if every single character is making world-changing choices. It sort of becomes... So for us, it's like putting the weight of decisions of how the world proceeds onto the player sort of made it indicative that it's like it's a solo adventure.
Right.
So I'm looking at all the screenshots here, and you mentioned that there's a pirate, so I'm assuming you can, like you said before, you can become a pirate. Actually, there's a couple pirates. There's a gentleman here with a beard that looks very sagely. Scottish fast-speaking mechanic, I'm assuming, or pilot. I'm not, again, unfortunately, I've not had a chance to play. I will be sure to do so as soon as I can. But there's a lot of different characters, and I'm wondering if any of them have any special significance to Corey, to Dee. Which characters really stand out to you within the game? And I know you put a lot of work into all of them, but do you have any ones in particular?
There are ones that definitely mirror our lives, but in ways that there's a reason why we put them in characters in the game. You know what I'm saying? And then if we told people what those characters were, the personal element that you're trying to hide would become visible. The one thing I can say that was a huge change to the game is that whole baby plot of the game. Because when we started this game, we didn't have a kid, and then we had a kid, and then that changed the story of the game.
Congrats, by the way.
Thank you. So that was kind of the main thing where it's like, and it made you sort of really realize the whole idea of like, I don't need to talk to anyone who's had a kid, and then when you don't really get it, but you sort of really see that connection of history all of a sudden, where you're like, all these people through all of this time had to make decisions to get me here, and I'm making these decisions, and they're small decisions, but they're ultimately huge in scope. It's an entire life, and you don't know what's going to happen. And that sort of profoundly impacted the direction of the game and in terms of the story campaign, and why we left the player with a child that they have to sort of choose the fate of as well.
Yeah, and there's also gender parity. We tried to make sure that it was very equal for the passengers that you could pick up male or female or non-binary characters. We tried to go through the full gamut of what kind of professions people have. So there's nurses, there's chefs, there's
oil rig workers.
Yeah, and then some of my favorite characters would be there is a woman who retards her body to stay in kind of like that teenager style, and so she goes to people's houses and pretends to be their kid because of this fertility law. A lot of people have the kids, so they still need that feeling of taking care of something, and so she goes and gets to be their kid for a bit, and then there's this whole question that opens up of, is this okay? Should she be offering this type of service?
And there are people nowadays that offer like friendships, or like you can go on the internet and find people who just will come and cuddle with you. So we're sort of playing on that existing dynamic. But, in this world, people have a deficit of not having that relationship with children. So it makes sense
We
that
have normal
spreads there.
people. We have conspiracy nuts. I tried to add a lot of dark humor to everyone as well.
Yeah, and in terms of the ability to play the game, it's not available yet, so that makes sense that you wouldn't have been able to play it.
That would
And that's
explain
also, that's also why you're only seeing a limited amount of the characters when you're scrolling through there. But
You did say 75 earlier, correct? And that's what you're aiming for?
there is definitely 75, and it's like in terms of the art production, it's almost done, and they're actually all fully voice acted. So we have all the voice recordings for all of these characters, basically, except for a few. But all that stuff is almost done. And I'm just sort of saying, as you're scrolling through looking for examples, it's not all going in our press material yet.
And by the way, since we're on the topic, I did want to ask. Obviously, COVID has thrown all timelines, all dates, all expected whatever into kind of into question. But when are you hoping to get this out? And because I mentioned COVID, how has recent development been?
It's been slower, that's for sure. Yeah. I mean, in some ways we feel very fortunate because we're in an industry where we can at least keep going. We're not serving customers things, and we didn't have to completely ever shut down our business.
Yeah, everyone left the office, went home, and continued to work.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been lucky in that way, but it's definitely things are harder. I mean, I didn't realize how much I just noticed things on people's screens and went, "Oh, you misunderstood what I said," and instead now you have to kind of wait to realize that you misunderstood, and it causes some.
But this year we're releasing.
We're releasing this year at some point. We actually don't know the exact numbers because we found people's ability to estimate time has also been altered a bit in terms of the feedback loop is elongated essentially, which slows things down. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to feel bad when people are going through much worse, and we also. Where we are in Canada, the government has been very supportive of small businesses across the board. So it's been good that way too.
I have heard of entire other industries, of course, shutting down, and then even within your industry, in the kind of if I could lump it all into the entertainment industry, I actually heard a report about that a couple of weeks ago about how voice acting and video games and even cartoon shows and things like that, the development has actually kind of sped up, or more money is being allocated to these, as opposed to like traditional blockbuster movies where you have to rent a studio or a set and everyone has to come in. You have to do shoots with actors. That's taken a pause, but with video games and voice acting has actually, as you said, continued on. So very, very lucky.
And we've also been lucky, at least so far. You never know because this pandemic's not over. But where we've lived specifically in Canada, Canada already does pretty good as a country with COVID. But where we lived in particular, we actually had it down to temporarily, but we had 1 week where it was down to like one case in our whole province.
Nice.
And so we've kind of lived in this bubble where we're living by the COVID rules, so you can't work in office, but we're not in a state of like
disarray,
terror outside kind of thing.
Long-time listeners know that I came back from CES 2020 just back in January, and I came down with the worst flu of my life in late January, early February, and I know now after taking some antibody tests that I actually had COVID back in January. It's not fun, and I can see why everyone's taking the right precautions, and I definitely encourage everyone to do it. But it's not fun, and I'm glad that you are, kind of you with your workforce are taking the right steps, and Canada in particular. I mean, there was just a story yesterday about how there's a quote unquote rush on Canada to get out of the U.S. and into Canada. Times are crazy. But circling back around to, of course, the game and everything that we've been, kind of talking about here, what platforms? Because I know that we've said augmented reality. This one is very clearly virtual reality. Have you decided to go with Steam? Like, what's the way that you're going to release this? And then what headsets or technologies is this going to be available on?
So we sort of have an overall, like, what do you call it?
Plan.
Well, plan. That's a simple way to put it. Yeah, I was going to use like a more businessy sounding word, but I forgot it. But we have a rollout across, all of the major VR markets. Obviously, Steam is probably the first market. We might be on Viveport at the same time as Steam. And then we'll go to Oculus. And we have plans also to get it onto PlayStation. And we might even do a non-VR version down the line, depending on how well it does in VR. But in terms of headset platforms, it's sort of like there's the best way to differentiate it is there's VR headsets that don't need a computer and ones that do. And pretty much any of the ones that need a computer, we support, from the HTC Vive to the Oculus to the HP devices. They're all supported. And the Oculus Quest and stuff is we hope so in the future. A lot of optimization work ahead of us because the world's so big. But they're also releasing new versions of those devices. So we're kind of hoping that as we get to a point where we can optimize for the mobile devices power level comes up, and we'll eventually get to Quest version 2 or Quest version 3, hopefully.
There's a lot of work to be done, and of course, the real difference for everyone out there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the real difference between those two platforms, again, a PC and non-PC version of virtual reality, is just that you have so much more access to the hardware. What can run smoothly, that kind of thing. And in your experience when developing for this, I mean, for virtual reality, you really have to prioritize things like frame rates. You have to prioritize latency, that kind of how long something takes for an input to kind of register. I mean, that how is working with virtual reality in that aspect, just kind of like the technical details of virtual reality?
It's very challenging. Frame rate's very challenging, and like somebody is in the game, often mere D, at a non-optimum state, trying to verify some other thing, and not every single build is built for performance because it's not the final release product. So that makes it hard. And it's honestly one of those things where like you can't just play the game in your Unity editor. Like if you're a 2D game or a traditional 3D game, you don't need to sort of get the headware and hardware on to try everything. So that extends the cycle as well. But yeah, to hit the frame rates and stuff is a challenge. And
locomotion too. We have people moving through a space in VR, which is a whole other ball game.
Yeah, locomotion in VR often causes motion sickness. Mm-hmm. And our game is featuring a flying taxi. And one of our key design requirements that we placed on ourselves, not all devs, some devs kind of just like some people get sick and they'll return the game or whatever, but we're trying very, very hard to create a flying environment that has, for most users, no motion sickness. It's hard to know about edge cases, but and that had a huge cost in terms of development cycles and play testing and a million little design decisions you have to make just so that when people play the game, they don't.
Thankfully, a lot of people on our team do get nauseous when they play any type of locomotion VR. So we had a lot of testers going in and saying.
That's the thing.
And so we've scaled it down based on our already sensitive stomachs.
Yeah, I get sick in VR, not extremely, but enough to notice it, and that makes the design process somewhat torturous because you get sick a lot. I'm actually fortunate because there's devs who don't have it, and you're like, how could they ever gauge if their game is going to make people sick if they're immune to it? It becomes very hard to make decisions. So it's one of those things where it's like, it kind of sucks that it happens to me, but it's ultimately a benefit of the final product. And hopefully we save users going through a similar experience.
And the game is also very...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the game is also very vertical. So I have a bit of vertigo. So I made sure that we don't go pitched up or down, that we make sure that people aren't going to get scared of heights all the time.
Yeah. And this stuff was all done in somewhat collaboration with actually local university research as well to help us try to find the right sweet spot. But
yeah, and really that's what I was talking about way at the beginning when I said that, some of the challenges with working with VR, movies don't have to worry about, Tom Cruise jumping out of a plane and falling down 10,000 feet. That's for the movie, it's fine because you're watching Tom Cruise do it. In virtual reality, though, yeah, I've seen people quit games because they just don't like the feeling of vertigo. They don't like the feeling of being uneasy or on the edge of a building or things like that. And they'll just say, that freaks me out just too much and I'm going to put it down. So I guess with a narrative-driven story, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that you want to utilize as many of the very powerful tools of VR that VR affords you, but in a narrative story, you want to make sure that the focus is on the characters, the setting, and the story.
Yeah, and even like something as simple like you're looking at the screenshots of the actual console where the player sits. That
Right.
thing was designed and redeveloped so many times to optimize all kinds of variables that are only in VR, like arm reach. You need to make sure that short people and tall people can reach all the controls smoothly. You got to make sure that when they reach for a control that's at the back, they don't clip through a control at the front, and it's got to have a size and heft and form factor that reduces motion sickness. So it's like there's just a lot of, hopefully nobody notices the design work, right? Like ideally people just get in and it feels good, but it's like the amount of iterations on something that in a normal game, when you're not worried about the arm reach of the real person, because people come in all different sizes, they don't have to worry about that. But for our game, because it's in VR, you do have to worry about that, and it makes it complicated.
And there wasn't a lot of work to draw from because VR is so new. We had to make a lot of these mistakes ourselves and try it over again.
Yeah, and it's been in development for 4 years, so even if there is contemporary people who found a solution to it, that doesn't mean that that solution was there when we started.
Right. One of my favorite examples is actually, I think it was like Gran Turismo or one of these larger VR racing games, and people found out that if you were racing the car, and of course you're sitting in the driver's seat, but if you physically stood up, your character, or I guess your headset would kind of detect that, and your head would go through the ceiling, through the roof, and you could look out at everything around you. And it was almost like a glitch / cheating. But I just found it funny that, during the testing phase, no one considered if the person sitting down in VR playing this, if they would ever stand up, and it completely broke the entire game. Like, you had to stay seated. Little things like that are something that developers run into every day. So I'm sure that you've run into a lot of issues, and I'm sure that it's been a lot of fun. And hey, experience for the next VR game.
That's right.
So, and of course, we have this next question here, although two that I wanted to roll up together, and it was about, of course, your post-launch plans. As you said, things are still very fluid. I wanted to talk about, kind of what kind of ongoing support are you hoping to have? Because in a story like this, I can easily see instances of maybe DLC characters or characters that you'd like to add different endings to, and every project, I guess, can continue to be added onto. But what kind of post-launch support are you planning on having? And then, I guess if you want to, because we're running short on time, I want to lump this together. What's next? Is it continued support for this, or are you already excited about your next project as well?
So in terms of post-launch support, yeah, there's definitely DLC plans in the pipeline. There's a lot of world building that is sort of like, for instance, if you look up at the moon in the game, not all screenshots currently reflect this, but it's actually like destroyed in this very strange way. And we sort of hint about what's going on, but there's a lot of little opportunities to explore different corners of the world. So there will be the traditional like character and story and location DLC that we have in the planned. We also have these base controls in the games like tractor beams and things that hack, but we feel like after the main story campaign has had time to breathe, we can put some really zany stuff in. Mm-hmm. Not everything we're necessarily going to explore, and then cosmetics, like some people might just want their taxi to look like an old Chevy or something, and give them the
Mobile fuzzy dice. We're gonna try it.
Yeah,
I demand a crazy taxi Last Taxi skin.
Well, we don't want to get sued, but we can hearken to it, perhaps. There
you go.
And then the second part of the question, sorry, I know it was a two-part.
The second part was about any kind of next projects. Have you already decided on what you're going to be working on next, or is it all Last Taxi?
So there is certainly, we intend to have the support for Last Taxi going forward, including like I said, getting onto PlayStation and expanding the device and platform compatibility. Some of that is obviously based on how much the game returns in revenue, but we certainly are foreseeing like a couple of years going into that. But with that said, after it's been out for a while, we're going to have both support for the game, as well as we do have a couple of ideas in the works. Some of them are AR and VR experiences, and some of them are honestly decidedly not AR and VR. We were like, we want this to run on a potato, like have the hook be something that doesn't take all this technical overhead. We're not necessarily ready to sort of talk about it, but there's a few key candidates that we're hoping to start to look for funding in the fall to get them slowly started as we go into the support cycle for Last Taxi.
And Dee, I'll let you answer this in just a second, but I got to say that visual novels and web comics and web series and things like that are only becoming more and more popular. So maybe following the characters in another medium and fleshing out the lore in the world setting, maybe a way to go.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, I'm not necessarily going to talk. I can't guarantee any plans, but we have explored Last Taxi virtual reality comic, like in a serious way, storyboarded. We have concept art for it. And we're going to experiment a little bit with a tweet coming out later this week or next week, where we actually did take screens from the game and put together like a little mini story. But that's something that we're definitely interested in. We do think that the world has enough to support going into new mediums, and our background is cross medium. But if the game doesn't take, you can't really build an IP off of it. So, but yeah, for sure, we've experimented with it, and our main artist who did a lot of the concept art for the game loves comic books. So it's something that we're looking at.
And then Dee, I mean, of course, post support and looking forward. I mean, what are you excited most about, Dee?
Releasing it.
Finally getting it out after 4 years, huh?
Getting the reactions, having people read or listen to the stories and gain their own opinions on what we're talking about, because in our hands, it only goes so far, because we're just creating the platform for people to actually put their own opinions and ideas on top of it.
We've already seen, based off the trailer, some very strange perceptions of what the game is about. So it'll be interesting to see what people think, and we're actually really excited to hear that. But yeah, get it done, get some rest. I mean, we literally, like, all those early years of your kid when you don't sleep at all, compounded on top of trying to make a game. It's just like a bit of a break might be nice at some point. So we're looking forward to that as well.
I hope you guys get lots of sleep and get lots of sleep here soon. But I think that's a good way to kind of wrap it up. And I'm going to end it with, either one of you, if you want to answer this, where is the best place to go for more information?
Well, if you're on Twitter, that's great, at Last Taxi, or The Last Taxi, at The Last Taxi. And otherwise, I would say, stick to the Steam page if you got Steam. And then there's always the website, thelasttaxi.com or
Easy
Last
enough.
Taxi. Yep. So go to any of those places, but whichever one's your preferred platform, we'll try to be there.
Yeah, we're on Facebook. We're on Facebook and Instagram, so pretty much every platform you can go in and see new content of the game coming out.
But if you got Steam wishlisted, that would be the most grand thing you can do.
Yeah, I see that right here, there as well. And both of you, and of course, for those of you who are just joining us at the very end, don't worry, there's the video archive, there's the podcast, all of this will be included in today's episode. But we have been talking to Mr. Corey King and Miss Dee King, and yeah, they have been telling us all about their latest game, The Last Taxi, and it's been a very interesting conversation. You have bitten off a lot here in this game, and I really do think it's going to be rewarded with tons of gameplay, tons of hours spent, and hey, you've definitely created something here very different, and I'm happy that you could come on to Computer America and talk to us about it. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, and so, Carissa, unless you have any other questions?
I think I'm good. I will be adding this to my wish list, though, on Steam.
There you go. So, hey, at least +1, and I gotta say, guys, that... yeah, thank you again for your time. Best of luck with the baby. Best of luck with the project. And hey, we're looking forward to the full release. Be sure to let us know, and we'll definitely tell everyone. But hey, I think you outlined it very well. And again, thank you for being on the show to talk about it.
Thank you.
All right, so everyone, and have a good day. Everyone, if you want to find out more, once again, lasttaxigame.com, and of course you can find out more at computeramerica.com. We'll have links to everything, so there you go. And now, with that being said, Carissa, I think we're going to, as we said before, unceremoniously boot our guest. And unfortunately, though, we have, there we go. We unfortunately have like 2 minutes left. So I think in that 2 minutes we can do a little bit of computer technology news. Before we do that, though, Carissa, how are you doing? What's up?
I'm pretty good. Just chilling, hanging out,
this was your first guest. This is your first interview. Obviously, you've been booking tons and tons of guests behind the scenes for Computer America for years. This is your first time being in front of the microphone with them. How was it? Because obviously, you have them fill out the forms, you have them submit their own questions. How was it?
Right, but I never get to see the front end stuff.
You never really get to talk about the project with them. So how was it?
I think it was really good. I really enjoyed hearing all about it and, peppering in some stuff here and there. Obviously, I'm still new, so I'm not talking a whole lot. But, I really enjoyed being a part of it. And I would do it again, 10 of 10.
Very, very
would
well.
recommend.
Hey, and you're definitely going to. There is music playing softly in the background, which actually started just a little bit too early. But hey, don't worry about it. That's my fault. But everyone, the music means that we're just about done. We're actually not going to do computer technology news. The whole thing was dedicated to our guest, and that's perfectly fine. We appreciate their time, and we're glad that they were able to give us all the time that they were able to. So everyone out there, Carissa, if I'm looking forward in the week, looks like we have Mike Cermak coming on the show tomorrow, followed by a couple more computer technology news. Hey, guest lineup is always changing, so we may have guests. We'll be sure to let you know. But Carissa, thank you for kind of doing this again. And hey, everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in.
Bye.
Yeah, well, actually, not bye just yet. We have like 30 seconds. We have to stretch out just a little bit more, Carissa. But
Okay.
yeah, with that being said, I just wanted to highlight once again that we do have an article coming out. I'm working on it as we speak. It's going to be a rather lengthy one about TikTok. Yes, I had to sit there and emotionally prepare myself to the fact that I'm writing an article about TikTok. It's not right, but here I am. So TikTok is going to be the subject of our next article that should be out here in a couple of hours. In the meantime, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.